Hey everyone, imagine waking up one morning to find someone trying to destroy something you've poured your heart into for years. That's exactly what happened when my HOA decided my award-winning garden was suddenly illegal. But what they did next, well, let's just say they picked the wrong gardener to mess with. 3 years ago, I bought my dream home in Maple Grove Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Portland. The house itself was nothing special, a modest two-story colonial that needed some TLC. But what caught my eye was the massive backyard, south-facing with perfect drainage. As a certified master gardener, I saw potential where others saw work. I'm Rachel Wilson, and gardening isn't just my hobby, it's my passion. Over those 3 years, I transformed that empty lawn into something magical. Raised beds filled with heirloom vegetables, native flower gardens that attracted countless butterflies, and yes, even a small greenhouse I built myself. My garden became a neighborhood attraction. Local kids would stop by to learn about butterflies, and neighbors would leave with armfuls of fresh tomatoes and zucchini in the summer. The previous owners had maintained a basic lawn, which technically fell under HOA guidelines. But I'd done my homework before starting my garden project. I reviewed all HOA documents, got the necessary permits from the city, and even had my plans approved by the architectural committee. Everything was by the book. For the first 2 years, things were perfect. My garden even won Best Sustainable Garden in the county fair last summer. The local paper did a feature on my pollinator-friendly design, and I started hosting monthly workshops teaching sustainable gardening practices. Even Margaret Thompson, our HOA president, attended one of my composting classes. At least that's what I thought was her reason for being there. It all started to change when I received an anonymous complaint about my excessive vegetation. At first, I laughed it off. The complaint cited an HOA guideline about lawn maintenance, but my property wasn't just some unmowed mess. It was a carefully planned ecosystem. Still, I decided to be proactive and reached out to Margaret, who everyone called Meg, to clarify any concerns. Meg invited me to her house for coffee, all smiles and pleasantries. "Rachel, dear," she said, stirring her coffee with practiced precision, "your garden is unique, but some board members are concerned about property values. Traditional lawns are more marketable." She slid a printed copy of the HOA guidelines across her granite countertop. "We're just asking for compliance." I pointed out that my garden had been approved years ago, showing her the documentation on my phone. She smiled that tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Things change, dear. The board is reviewing all properties to ensure consistent standards." As I left Meg's house that day, I noticed David Cooper and Susan Parker, both HOA board members, taking photos of my garden from the sidewalk. They quickly pretended to be admiring the butterflies when they saw me, but I knew better. Something was coming. I just didn't expect it to happen so fast. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of voices in my front yard. Through my bedroom window, I spotted Meg Thompson standing with a man in a crisp suit, pointing at various parts of my garden. I threw on some clothes and headed outside, but they were already walking away, heads bent in serious discussion. I spent that morning tending to my vegetable beds, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling their presence had left me with. That's when Emma Martinez, my neighbor from 2 doors down, rushed over with worry written all over her face. She'd overheard something at the last HOA meeting that I needed to know about. "Rachel, they're planning something big," Emma whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Meg's brought in this new board member, Janet Miller. She's some sort of real estate developer, and she's convinced everyone that natural gardens like yours are driving down property values." I thanked Emma for the warning, but honestly, I wasn't too concerned yet. My garden was legal, documented, and beneficial to the community. Plus, I had 3 years of HOA compliance on my side. What could they really do? The answer came in the form of a certified letter 2 days later. Inside was a formal notice from the HOA board citing violation of Section 8, 3, 4 of the community guidelines. All residential properties must maintain a well-groomed lawn consisting of approved grass varieties. The letter conveniently ignored the amendments and approvals I'd received years ago, but it was the next paragraph that made my blood boil. The board had unanimously voted to require the removal of all non-conforming vegetation within 30 days. They'd even generously offered to recommend a landscaping company that could restore the property to compliance, at my expense, of course. I immediately called John Chen, my other neighbor, who happened to be a local reporter. He'd covered similar HOA disputes before, and I wanted his perspective. "Document everything," he advised. "Take photos, save emails, record conversations if it's legal in your state. Something's not right here." That afternoon, Bill Henderson, another board member, stopped by. Unlike Meg's polished performance, Bill was more direct. "Look, Rachel, we all know you're good at this garden stuff, but times are changing. The board's pushing for a more unified neighborhood aesthetic. Janet's got some great plans for community beautification." I pressed him for details about these great plans, but he just shrugged. "Nothing set in stone yet, but between us, Janet's got connections with a major development company. They're interested in showcasing our neighborhood as a model community. Your garden, well, it doesn't fit the image they're going for." That's when things clicked. This wasn't about property values or community standards. This was about developers and money. My garden had become an obstacle to someone's grand vision for the neighborhood. Later that evening, I noticed Susan Parker walking her dog past my house for the third time that day. Each time she'd stop to take photos with her phone, pretending to be photographing her poodle. I started keeping a log of these drive-bys and walk-bys. Within just 1 week, I documented over 20 surveillance incidents by various board members. The real kicker came when Ashley Brown, who worked at the local garden center, pulled me aside during my weekly supply run. "Rachel, you won't believe this. Meg and Janet were just in here asking about the cost of completely resodding a yard your size. They also wanted to know if we could remove mature plants and a greenhouse in a single day. They weren't just planning to force me to change my garden. They were actively preparing to do it themselves." I spent that night reviewing every HOA document, every approval, every permit I'd ever received. I created digital copies of everything and stored them in multiple locations. If they wanted a fight, I was going to be prepared. The next morning, I installed security cameras covering every angle of my garden. I also posted laminated copies of my permits and approvals on stakes throughout the garden. Petty, perhaps, but satisfying. Then I sent a formal response to the HOA's letter, citing all relevant documents and requesting an emergency board meeting to discuss their concerns. Their reply came through David Cooper, who caught me as I was leaving for work. "The board's very busy right now," he said. That same rehearsed smile I was starting to hate. "But we're happy to schedule something after the 30-day compliance period ends." In other words, they wanted to delay any discussion until after their deadline passed. They thought they had me cornered, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was just some hobby gardener who would cave under pressure. They had no idea I was about to turn their own rules against them. I needed to act fast, though. The clock was ticking, and I had a feeling this was just the beginning of their plan. That night, as I watched Meg and Janet slowly drive past my house for what felt like the 100th time, I realized this wasn't just about saving my garden anymore. This was about standing up to bullies who thought they could steamroll anyone who didn't fit their perfect suburban vision. My first step was to research Janet Miller. John Chen, my reporter neighbor, helped me dig into public records, and what we found was fascinating. Janet wasn't just any real estate developer. She was connected to Greenview Developments, a company known for buying up entire neighborhoods and transforming them into cookie-cutter luxury communities. I spent a weekend combing through their previous projects. The pattern was always the same: infiltrate HOA boards, change bylaws, pressure homeowners to sell, and completely reshape neighborhoods. My garden wasn't just an eyesore to them. It was the obstacle to their plans for Maple Grove Estates. One morning, I noticed a group of men in suits walking through the neighborhood, led by Janet and Meg. They stopped at several houses, taking notes and photos. When they reached my property, they spent an unusually long time discussing something while pointing at various parts of my garden. I grabbed my phone and started recording. That's when Janet noticed me. Instead of being embarrassed about being caught, she walked right up to my fence. "Mrs. Wilson, we were just admiring your unique approach to landscaping. Have you given any thought to our notice?" I stood my ground. "You mean the notice that ignores my previously approved permits and plans?"
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Yes, I've thought about it. I've also thought about how interesting it is that you joined our HOA board right after your company started buying properties in the area. Janet's professional smile flickered for just a moment. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but the board is simply trying to maintain community standards. Your garden, while charming, doesn't align with our vision for Maple Grove Estates." "Our vision," I repeated, "or Greenview's vision." She straightened her blazer. "Mrs. Wilson, let's be reasonable. Change is inevitable. You can either adapt or, well, there are other options. The market is excellent right now for sellers." Before I could respond, Emma Martinez came running over. "Rachel, you need to see this." She thrust her tablet into my hands. On it was a digital rendering of new Maple Grove Estates, a planned community of identical houses with perfectly manicured lawns. The rendering was dated 3 months ago, before Janet even joined the board. Janet's face hardened. "That's confidential business information. Where did you get that?" Emma crossed her arms. "My sister works in architectural visualization. She created these renderings for Greenview. Funny how they show our neighborhood completely transformed before any homeowners were consulted." More neighbors started gathering, attracted by our raised voices. Susan Parker tried to disperse the crowd, but the damage was done. Their secret was out. That evening, an emergency HOA meeting was called. The community center was packed. I'd never seen so many neighbors attend a meeting. Meg tried to maintain control, but the atmosphere was tense. "This meeting will come to order," Meg announced, but the murmuring continued. "We're here to discuss community standards and property values." I stood up. "No, we're here to discuss how Greenview Developments has been secretly planning to take over our neighborhood, using the HOA as their puppet." The room erupted. Bill Henderson attempted to deny everything, but Ashley Brown, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "I have copies of emails between board members and Greenview executives discussing property acquisition strategies dating back 6 months. David Cooper turned pale. "Those emails were private board communications. They were sent using the garden center's public Wi-Fi." Ashley shot back. "Maybe next time, don't plan your takeover while pretending to shop for mulch." Janet remained eerily calm throughout the chaos. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the noise like ice. "Everything we've done is perfectly legal. The HOA has the right to update its guidelines, and the board has voted. Mrs. Wilson's garden violates our new standards. End of discussion." That's when John Chen stood up. "Actually, I've been recording this meeting for a story I'm writing about predatory development practices in suburban communities. Would you like to clarify that statement for the record?" The look on Janet's face was priceless. She glanced at Meg, who was frantically shuffling through papers, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I seized the moment. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current board, as per Section 12 of our bylaws. Any board member with undisclosed conflicts of interest must resign immediately. The vote was overwhelming. Janet stormed out before it was even finished, followed by Meg and most of the old board members. But our victory celebration was short-lived. As Janet left, she turned and smiled, that same cold, professional smile. "This isn't over, Mrs. Wilson. There are many ways to skin a cat or kill a garden." I didn't know it then, but she was right. This was just the beginning of their real assault on my garden. They'd lost the battle, but they were about to start a war that would make their previous attacks look like child's play. 2 days after the emergency meeting, I woke up to find my garden hose slashed. Not just cut, but methodically slashed a few feet. The damage was too precise to be vandalism. This was a message. The new HOA board, led by Emma Martinez, who'd stepped up as interim president, fully supported my garden. But Janet and her followers hadn't gone away. They'd just changed tactics. Instead of using official channels, they started a whisper campaign. It began with anonymous letters in neighbors' mailboxes. Did you know property values drop 15% when neighborhoods allow wild gardens? And studies show natural gardens attract dangerous wildlife. All lies, of course, but effective ones. Neighbors who'd supported me at the meeting started avoiding eye contact. Then came the complaints to the city. Every week, a new violation report, pest concerns, water usage violations, structure permits questioned. Each complaint required inspection, documentation, and precious time to disprove. The city inspector, Mike, started bringing coffee during his mandatory visits. "Fourth complaint this week, Rachel," he'd say, shaking his head. "Someone really doesn't like butterflies." The psychological warfare escalated. Cars would drive by at night, high beams illuminating my garden, strange sounds of metal hitting. Metal would wake me at 3 a.m., but when I checked the cameras, I'd find nothing. They were careful to stay just outside the camera range. One morning, I found all my free organic vegetables signs torn down. Later that day, Susan Parker was overheard at the local cafe saying, "I heard she's selling produce without a license. Isn't that illegal?" It wasn't. I gave the vegetables away for free, but the damage was done. Janet Miller hadn't gone away either. She'd bought a house 3 streets over and started hosting neighborhood improvement meetings. Through the grapevine, I learned they were discussing health hazards of uncontrolled gardens and the negative impact of non-conforming properties on home sales. The pressure was constant and creative. Someone reported my greenhouse as an unauthorized structure despite its existing permits. The city had to investigate, finding nothing wrong, but the process took weeks. During inspections, I noticed Janet and Meg taking photos from their cars, documenting every official visit as if building a case. Water bills became another weapon. Someone kept turning on my garden's irrigation system in the middle of the night, running up massive water bills. I installed locks on the control box, only to find them mysteriously damaged days later. The local garden center where Ashley worked suddenly stopped carrying the specialized soil mix I needed. When Ashley investigated, she discovered that someone had threatened to report them for code violations if they continued serving me. She secretly kept me supplied, hiding bags of soil under generic labels. The real estate tactics got dirty too. Houses near mine started receiving lowball offers from mysterious buyers. John Chen traced them back to shell companies connected to Greenview developments. They were trying to devalue the entire street to force sales. One particularly nasty incident involved my butterfly garden. I'd spent years cultivating specific plants to attract endangered monarch butterflies. Someone sprayed them with herbicide overnight, carefully avoiding my cameras. The plants died within days, and the butterflies disappeared. When I posted about it on the community forum, Meg commented, "Perhaps this is nature's way of saying, some gardens don't belong here." The psychological impact was wearing me down. Every morning I'd check for new damage. Every night I'd lie awake listening for suspicious sounds. My garden, once my sanctuary, was becoming a battlefield. But they underestimated my resolve. Each attack strengthened my determination. I installed more cameras, motion sensor lights, and documented everything. John Chen's newspaper articles about predatory development practices gained traction. Other neighborhoods started reporting similar patterns. The turning point came when Bill Henderson's conscience finally got the better of him. He showed up at my door one rainy evening, looking nervous. "Rachel, I can't sleep at night anymore. You need to know what they're planning. Janet's got a bigger scheme. Your garden is just the beginning. They want to force everyone out, rebuild the entire neighborhood. They've been sabotaging properties, manipulating property values, all of it." I recorded our conversation as Bill detailed their methods: targeted harassment, coordinated complaints, deliberate property damage made to look accidental. He even admitted to participating in some of it, showing me text messages coordinating their attacks. "Why tell me now?" I asked. He looked ashamed. "They're escalating. Janet's talking about bringing in heavy equipment by mistake while you're at work. She says if they damage enough of your garden, you'll have no choice but to restore it to a regular lawn. I can't be part of that." As Bill left, I noticed Janet's car slowly driving by, headlights off. She'd seen him visiting. The next day, Bill's house had a "for sale" sign in the front yard. He'd been forced out for breaking ranks. That night, I called an emergency meeting with Emma, John, Ashley, and my other supporters. We needed a new strategy. They weren't just fighting my garden anymore. They were fighting for control of our entire community. And I had a feeling their next move would be their boldest yet. Friday morning brought the sound I'd been dreading. Machinery. Heavy machinery. I rushed outside to find a landscaping crew positioning their equipment around my garden's perimeter. Janet Miller stood in my driveway, holding what looked like official documents. "Mrs. Wilson," she called out, waving the papers, "the city has declared your garden a public nuisance. We're here to resolve the situation." I immediately started, recording on my phone, "Show me the order." She handed over a document that at first glance looked official, but 3 years of dealing with permits had taught me what to look for. The letterhead was right, but the authorization number format was wrong. "This is fake," I stated flatly. "The city doesn't issue nuisance orders with this coding system." Janet's smile didn't waver. "Are you sure about that? Your garden has been the subject of numerous complaints. The city has to act." I pulled out my phone and dialed Mike, the city inspector who'd become a regular visitor. "Mike, there's a crew here claiming to have a nuisance order for my garden. Authorization number NP7745X. Mike's response was immediate. "That's not our format. Don't let them touch anything. I'm on my way." But Janet wasn't finished. She turned to the crew. "Start with the greenhouse. It's clearly an unauthorized structure." "Touch my property and I'll have you arrested for vandalism," I warned, stepping between them and my greenhouse. The police are already on their way. Emma Martinez and John Chen appeared at my side. My neighbors had seen the trucks and come running. More residents gathered, phones recording everything. Janet's composure cracked slightly. "This is a legal order," she insisted, but her voice had an edge of desperation. "Then you won't mind waiting 15 minutes for the city inspector to verify it," I replied. The crew leader looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Miller, you said you had proper authorization." "We do," Janet snapped. "Start working, now." "Don't," I warned them. "Those papers are forged. You'll be liable for any damage." The crew started, backing away. They'd seen enough hostile property disputes to know when something wasn't right. Janet pulled out her phone, walking away to make a heated call. Minutes later, Meg Thompson arrived, looking flustered. She pulled Janet aside, but their angry whispers carried across my yard. "You said you had legitimate papers." "I told you I'd handle it. The whole neighborhood is watching." Mike's city vehicle pulled up, followed by 2 police cars. Janet and Meg's faces went pale. Mike took one look at the document and shook his head. "This is a forgery, a poor one at that." The police officers approached Janet and Meg. "Ladies, we need to discuss filing false documents and attempted property damage." What happened next showed their true colors. Janet turned to the gathered crowd and shouted, "Look at what she's doing to our neighborhood. Property values are plummeting because she won't comply with reasonable standards." Meg joined in, her practiced HOA president smile gone. "We're trying to protect our investments. That garden is a disaster waiting to happen." Emma stepped forward. "The only disaster here is your attempt to bully everyone into selling their homes. We've seen the Greenview plans." The police separated everyone, taking statements. Janet and Meg were escorted to the police station to answer questions about the forged documents. The landscaping crew packed up, the leader apologizing profusely. "We were told this was a city-ordered cleanup. We want no part of this." As the chaos subsided, I surveyed my garden. They hadn't managed to damage anything, but the morning's events had shaken me. This wasn't just harassment anymore. They'd crossed into criminal territory. Later that afternoon, Ashley Brown rushed over with news. "You won't believe what just happened at the garden center." Janet came in ranting about getting even. She was ordering bulk herbicide when she got a call that made her go white. She ran out mid-purchase. We soon learned why. John Chen's contact at the city had discovered something big. Greenview Developments was under investigation for similar tactics in other neighborhoods. Janet's attempt to force entry to my property with forged documents had drawn attention from investigators who'd been building a case. That evening, Emma organized an emergency community meeting. The turnout was unprecedented. Even residents who'd stayed neutral could no longer ignore what was happening. "We're at a crossroads," Emma announced. "We can let developers bully us out of our homes, or we can fight back. Rachel's garden isn't the real issue. It never was. This is about corporate greed trying to destroy our community." The mood in the room shifted. Neighbors who'd avoided me started sharing stories of their own encounters with Janet and Meg. Subtle threats, strange property damage, mysterious complaints. Bill Henderson's wife stood up. "They forced us to sell, threatened to make our lives miserable if we didn't. We're not the only ones." Support flooded in. A retired lawyer offered pro bono help. Security experts volunteered to upgrade my camera system. Master gardeners from neighboring communities pledged to help document and protect my garden's value. But while community support strengthened, I knew Janet and Meg weren't finished. Their public humiliation would only fuel their revenge. As I watched the sun set over my embattled garden that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that their next attack would be their most vicious yet. The aftermath of Janet's failed demolition attempt brought unexpected allies. City Inspector Mike arrived early Monday morning, not for another complaint, but with a purpose. "Rachel, this goes beyond your garden," he said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "We've found similar patterns in 3 other neighborhoods. Greenview's fingerprints are everywhere, but they're careful. We need hard evidence." My security cameras had captured more than just attempted garden destruction. They'd recorded months of systematic harassment. John Chen helped me compile a timeline. Suspicious cars, mysterious property damage, coordinated complaints. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, our neighborhood's automated sprinkler system logs. Ashley discovered that someone had been accessing the central control panel, creating artificial water usage spikes on my property. The access code used? Meg Thompson's. While reviewing footage from my new security system, we noticed something odd. Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork, Janet would park outside the community center after hours. She'd spend exactly 47 minutes inside, always leaving with a manila envelope. Emma Martinez, our interim HOA president, investigated. The old board kept paper records in the community center, she explained. Records that were never digitized, including original property agreements and grandfather clauses. We organized a legal review of HOA documents. The discoveries were shocking. Dozens of original homeowner agreements had disappeared, replaced with altered versions. The changes were subtle, a word here, a clause there, but they created loopholes for property acquisition. Bill Henderson's wife provided the missing piece. Before we sold, Janet showed us documents proving we couldn't fight the changes. Now I wonder if those papers were even real. I hired a forensic accountant. She traced patterns of property devaluation following Greenview's arrival. First, they'd target one house with complaints and harassment. Once that owner sold, neighboring property values would mysteriously drop. A domino effect of forced sales. The investigation revealed more victims. Sarah Chen, John's sister-in-law, ran a daycare from her home. They buried me in licensing complaints, she explained. Every week a new violation. I couldn't keep up with inspections, had to close down. We found their playbook in a forgotten USB drive left in the community center printer. Development plans, target lists, even scripts for confrontations. My garden wasn't their first target. It was just the first one that fought back. Janet's mistake was underestimating our community's resources. Tom Rodriguez, a cybersecurity expert living on Oak Street, analyzed the HOA's email server. He found hundreds of messages between Janet, Meg, and Greenview executives discussing their neighborhood acquisition strategy. The evidence painted a clear picture. Greenview would plant people like Janet on HOA boards. They'd change bylaws, create violations, and pressure homeowners to sell. Once they controlled enough properties, they'd redevelop the entire neighborhood. Local news got involved. John's articles exposed similar patterns across the city. Other communities reached out, sharing their experiences with Greenview's tactics. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source. David Cooper's teenage daughter, feeling guilty about her father's involvement, shared screenshots of a private Facebook group. There, Janet, Meg, and other Greenview operatives openly discussed their methods. Target the unique properties first, one post read. Gardens, home businesses, any non-standard uses. They're easier to pressure with regulations. The group documented their victories. Families forced out, properties acquired, communities transformed. They even shared tips for manipulating property values and creating artificial violations. My garden had become ground zero in a larger fight. It wasn't just about preserving my plants anymore. It was about protecting communities from corporate predators. Legal experts reviewed our evidence. The pattern was clear. Forge documents, create violations, pressure residents, acquire properties. Rinse and repeat. But proving it required connecting all the dots. We created a secure database, documenting every incident. Security footage, altered documents, suspicious patterns, everything. Other neighborhoods contributed their evidence, strengthening the case. The investigation revealed their next targets. Janet's group had already marked 7 more properties for violation enforcement, each one unique in some way: a home pottery studio, a historical renovation, a multi-generational family home. As we dug deeper, we discovered Greenview's shell companies, They'd buy properties through different entities, hiding their accumulation of land. The same pattern appeared in every targeted neighborhood. The pressure was mounting, but Janet and Meg doubled down. They started spreading rumors about our investigation, calling it a conspiracy theory, but the evidence was undeniable. We'd uncovered their entire operation. Now we needed to decide how to use this information. Going public could warn other communities, but it might also provoke desperate actions from Janet and her allies. That decision was made for us when my security cameras caught Janet and Meg in my garden at 2 a.m., carrying something that looked suspiciously like herbicide containers. They didn't know that every drop of evidence they created would soon become their undoing. City permits started disappearing. My carefully filed greenhouse authorization misplaced. Garden approval documents, system error. Every official record that supported my garden's legitimacy began vanishing from government databases. The city clerk, Barbara, pulled me aside during another frustrating visit. Someone's been requesting unusual amounts of access to property records. They're using official letterhead from multiple departments. I submitted backup copies of every permit. Within days, they'd vanish again. The system would show pending review or status unclear. Each missing document required a new application, new fees, new inspections. Then the serious notices started arriving. Code violations, zoning infractions, environmental concerns. Each letter seemed legitimate until you looked closer. Wrong fonts, incorrect department codes, but fighting them required time and legal resources. Janet's influence reached further than we'd imagined. My water meter readings suddenly showed impossible usage, thousands of gallons daily. When I challenged the bills, the water department found technical difficulties with their equipment. The tax assessor's office contacted me about a routine review. They'd received reports that my property improvements weren't properly documented. My property value assessment skyrocketed along with my taxes. Local businesses started refusing garden-related services. My regular soil supplier cited inventory issues. Equipment rental companies were mysteriously booked solid. Even the local garden waste collection service cancelled my account due to route optimization. Emma discovered that Janet's sister worked in county records, perfect position to cause paperwork to vanish. John Chen's contact in the permit office confirmed someone was systematically challenging every document related to my property. The bureaucratic assault intensified. Health department inspections, wildlife surveys, environmental impact studies. Each investigation found nothing wrong, but fighting them drained time and resources. Anonymous complaints flooded city departments. Illegal composting, unauthorized water features, endangered species habitat destruction. Each required investigation, documentation, defense. They tried cutting off my allies. Ashley's garden center received surprise inspections. Emma faced audits of her interim HOA leadership. John's newspaper editor got pressure about his biased reporting, but their tactics exposed their desperation. Each false complaint left a paper trail. Every forged document provided evidence. We tracked patterns in the attacks, building our case methodically. Professional licenses became targets. My master gardener certification faced review. Environmental education permits were questioned. They tried blocking my ability to teach community workshops. The community fought back. Neighbors documented everything. Security cameras caught people planting evidence of violations. Analysis of complaint letters revealed identical typing patterns despite different supposed authors. Local officials started noticing patterns. Too many complaints, too many lost documents, too many coincidences. Some began quietly helping us, marking our files for special handling to prevent tampering. Janet's group got sloppy. Rushed forgeries had obvious errors. Complaint letters used identical phrasing. Multiple documents traced back to the same printer at the community center. We created a secure digital archive. Every permit, approval, and inspection report scanned, notarized, and stored off-site. Physical copies went to multiple secure locations. They couldn't erase what we'd protected. The breakthrough came through Barbara, the city clerk. She'd been tracking document access patterns, building a timeline of suspicious activity. Her records proved systematic tampering with official files. Legal experts confirmed interfering with government records was criminal. Each forged document, each false complaint, each tampered file added to potential charges. We'd caught them in their own bureaucratic trap, but Janet had one last card to play. A letter arrived from the State Environmental Protection Office ordering an immediate cease and desist of all garden activities, pending investigation of severe ecological violations. The letter looked perfect. Official letterhead, correct formatting, proper signatures, but we'd learned to dig deeper. John's contact in state government confirmed no such investigation existed. They'd forged state documents, a federal offense. Our careful documentation was about to pay off. Each false complaint, each forged document, each manipulated record had strengthened our case. They thought bureaucracy would bury us. Instead, it gave us the evidence we needed. As I sorted through the latest batch of fake violations, my security system pinged. Janet's car had just pulled into the community center parking lot, Tuesday night, right on schedule. But this time, we were ready. Sometimes the best weapon against bureaucratic warfare is patience and a really good paper trail. The security alert came at 2:47 a.m. Motion sensors triggered, cameras activated. Through my phone screen, I watched 3 figures in dark clothing methodically destroying my garden. They worked with purpose, spraying chemicals on plants, uprooting vegetables, dismantling greenhouse panels. I called the police immediately, then Emma and John. By the time I got downstairs, neighbors had surrounded my property. The intruders were trapped between angry residents and approaching police sirens. The floodlights revealed their identities. Janet Miller, Meg Thompson, and David Cooper stood frozen, caught red-handed. The evidence was undeniable. Security footage, chemical sprayers in hand, destruction clearly visible. "This is private property," I announced, recording everything. "The police are on their way." Janet's composure cracked. "Your garden is destroying property values. We're protecting our investments." The police arrived quickly. Officer Martinez, no relation to Emma, surveyed the damage. "Ma'am, this is extensive vandalism. We're looking at serious charges." The destruction was calculated. They targeted rare plants, destroyed documentation posted on the greenhouse, and poured chemicals into the irrigation system. Years of work deliberately ruined. Crime scene investigators arrived. They documented everything: chemical residue, tool marks, footprints. Janet, Meg, and David were taken to the station. Their cars, parked 3 blocks away, contained more evidence: detailed garden maps, additional chemicals, Greenview documents. Dawn revealed the full extent of damage. Endangered butterfly plants destroyed, heritage vegetables uprooted, greenhouse panels shattered. They'd even poured concrete into parts of the irrigation system. The community mobilized. Master gardeners documented plant damage. Environmental specialists collected soil samples. Licensed contractors assessed structural damage. Every detail strengthened the case. Their attack backfired spectacularly. Local news arrived, capturing the destruction. John Chen's article went viral. Corporate developers behind neighborhood garden vandalism. Other media picked up the story. Greenview scrambled to distance themselves. They issued statements denying involvement, but emails found in Janet's car proved otherwise. Corporate communications detailed the removal strategy for non-conforming properties. The investigation expanded. Police found Janet's detailed notebooks, documenting every step of their campaign, surveillance logs, harassment, strategies. lists of targeted properties, their entire operation exposed. State environmental agencies got involved. The chemicals they'd used were restricted substances. Janet lacked proper licenses. Each violation added to potential charges. The district attorney's office took interest. This wasn't simple vandalism, it was organized criminal activity. Conspiracy, property destruction, environmental crimes, fraud. The charges mounted. Community support overwhelmed me. Neighbors organized garden restoration teams. Local nurseries donated plants. Environmental groups offered assistance. My garden became a symbol of resistance against corporate bullying. Janet, Meg, and David faced serious consequences. Their actions violated multiple laws: environmental, regulations, property rights, criminal conspiracy. Even their previous harassment campaign could now be prosecuted. Greenview's involvement became clear. Corporate emails outlined their neighborhood acquisition strategy. Janet's notes revealed their step-by-step playbook. Similar patterns emerged in other communities. The evidence trail led to higher-ups. Janet wasn't just a rogue agent. She followed corporate directions. Each targeted property fitted their development plans. Every harassed homeowner matched their acquisition strategy. State investigators uncovered more. Similar incidents across multiple cities. Same tactics, different names. Greenview operated through various shells, but patterns remained consistent. The midnight attack became their downfall. Security footage showed their methodical destruction. Soil tests proved chemical use. Documentation detailed planning. No claim of misunderstanding could explain away their actions. Legal proceedings began. Criminal charges for the immediate perpetrators. Civil suits against Greenview. Regulatory. Investigations into corporate practices. Their development plans crumbled under legal scrutiny. The garden restoration started immediately. The community didn't wait for legal resolution. Volunteers arrived daily. Expert gardeners advised replanting. Local businesses donated supplies. My garden would survive, stronger than before. But the midnight attack changed everything. It exposed corporate developers' tactics, united the community, and sparked investigations nationwide. Sometimes, destruction leads to unexpected growth. The district attorney's office became my second home. Hours of testimony, mountains of evidence, endless documentation. Greenview's lawyers arrived in expensive suits, armed with motions to dismiss. Our evidence was overwhelming. Security footage showed Janet, Meg, and David methodically destroying my garden. Chemical analysis proved they used restricted herbicides. Their own documents detailed the conspiracy. The charges expanded beyond vandalism. Criminal conspiracy, environmental violations, wire fraud from their falsified documents, each charge supported by meticulous evidence we'd gathered. Greenview's defense crumbled quickly. They tried claiming Janet acted alone, but emails proved corporate involvement. They attempted to settle quietly, but the DA refused. This case would set precedents. State investigators uncovered similar patterns nationwide. My garden wasn't unique, just the first to fight back successfully. Other communities came forward with identical stories. The Environmental Crimes Unit took special interest. The chemicals used were industrial grade, requiring special permits. Janet's team had no authorization. Each application violated federal law. Corporate emails revealed their playbook: target unique properties, create violations, force compliance, purchase under market value. Their entire business model relied on intimidation and fraud. The SEC launched an investigation. Greenview's development practices attracted federal attention. Stock prices plummeted. Shareholders demanded answers. Janet cracked under pressure, offered a deal. She detailed everything. Corporate training sessions, systematic harassment strategies, lists of targeted communities. Her testimony implicated executives. Meg followed, desperate to minimize charges. She provided internal documents, meeting recordings, financial records. Each piece strengthened the prosecution's case. David Cooper turned state's evidence. His testimony revealed Greenview's recruitment tactics. They sought people with HOA experience, trained them in property acquisition techniques, rewarded successful intimidation. The trial became national news. Corporate developers' garden warfare made headlines. Environmental groups filed amicus briefs. Property rights organizations monitored proceedings. Greenview's CEO resigned. Board members faced indictments. Stock value plummeted further. The company's predatory development strategy exposed. Their empire began crumbling. Janet, Meg, and David pleaded guilty to multiple felonies. Their sentences included jail time, massive fines, and restoration costs. The judge cited their calculated destruction of environmental resources in harsh sentencing. Civil suits followed. Class actions from other communities. Environmental damage claims, property value lawsuits. Greenview faced legal battles nationwide. My garden became symbolic. Environmental lawyers cited the case in other battles. Property rights advocates studied our documentation methods. HOA reform groups highlighted our community's resistance. The legal victory brought unexpected changes. State legislators proposed garden protection acts. Environmental groups established rapid response teams. Communities created early warning networks against predatory development. Local government reformed permit systems. Digital records got better protection. Anonymous complaints faced stricter scrutiny. Each change made corporate harassment harder. Greenview's collapse sparked industry changes. Developers faced increased scrutiny. Community rights gained protection. Environmental considerations became paramount. The Garden Restoration Fund, established from legal settlements, supported similar projects nationwide. My experience helped others protect their green spaces. Our community emerged stronger. New HOA bylaws protected environmental initiatives. Property rights gained explicit protection. Gardens flourished where lawns once dominated. The legal battle taught valuable lessons. Document everything. Build community allies. Know your rights. Most importantly, never underestimate corporate greed or community strength. As spring arrived, my garden bloomed again. New plants replaced destroyed ones. The greenhouse stood rebuilt. Victory grew sweeter than any vegetable I'd ever harvested. The town hall meeting was packed, every seat filled, people standing along walls. Greenview's remaining executives faced angry residents from dozens of communities. Our evidence projected on massive screens. Security footage showed garden destruction. Documents revealed corporate conspiracy. Financial records traced predatory purchases through shell companies. Greenview's legal team tried damage control. Isolated incidents, they claimed, rogue employees. The crowd's laughter was bitter. Too many had similar stories. Sarah Chen, John's sister-in-law, testified first. Her daycare destroyed by manufactured violations. Next, Bill Henderson detailed forced sales tactics. Each testimony strengthened our case. Community after community shared identical patterns: HOA infiltration, targeted harassment, forced sales, property destruction. Greenview's playbook exposed. Environmental experts presented damage assessments, soil contamination from illegal chemicals, destroyed habitats, long-term ecological impact, each detail damning. Financial analysts revealed broader patterns: property value manipulation, artificial market depression, coordinated acquisition strategies. Their entire business model based on community destruction. Local officials acknowledged failures, overlooked complaints, ignored patterns, rubber-stamped permits. Reform proposals followed each admission. Greenview's shareholders attended virtually. Stock prices plummeted with each revelation. Board members faced tough questions. Investors demanded accountability. Janet's video testimony played. She detailed corporate training sessions, harassment strategies, target selection criteria. Her calm recitation chilled the room. Meg's documentation proved devastating. Internal emails, strategy meetings, executive orders, each piece connecting corporate leadership to local crimes. David Cooper's evidence completed the picture. Financial records, shell companies, hidden ownership patterns, their entire operation exposed. The tide turned during public comments. Elderly residents described harassment. Young families detailed intimidation. Garden lovers shared destruction stories. Emma presented our community's response. New HOA protections, environmental initiatives, property rights guarantees. A model for others to follow. Real estate experts testified about market impact, property value studies, development alternatives, community-centered growth strategies. Environmental groups proposed solutions, garden protection laws, habitat preservation requirements, development restrictions near green spaces. Legal experts outlined precedents we'd set. Property rights enforcement, environmental protections, corporate accountability standards. Town council members introduced new ordinances, development restrictions, environmental protections, community input requirements. The meeting lasted hours. Every voice heard, every concern addressed, every solution considered. Greenview's executives left defeated, their business model exposed, their reputation destroyed, their future uncertain. Our community emerged united. Stronger protections, better oversight, renewed commitment to preservation. The garden became a symbol, not just of resistance, but of growth, community strength, environmental protection. This wasn't just about one garden anymore. It was about community rights, environmental protection, corporate accountability. The garden's new security system lit up like a Christmas tree. Motion sensors tracked movement. Cameras recorded everything. Environmental monitors detected chemical traces. After Greenview's exposure, we expected retaliation. Their remaining allies still pose threats. Corporate developers don't surrender easily. The community created a rapid response network. Suspicious activity triggered alerts. Neighbors monitored property boundaries. Security teams patrolled regularly. Our documentation system expanded. Every incident recorded. Every interaction logged. Every document secured. Multiple backups protected evidence. Local police increased patrols. Anonymous tips suggested revenge. Plans. Former Greenview employees warned of threats. We stayed vigilant. Environmental sensors detected tampering attempts. Soil contamination efforts. Water supply interference. Chemical attacks. Each blocked by new safeguards. Security footage caught corporate spies. Property assessors with fake credentials. Surveyors without permits. Inspectors with forged documents. The greenhouse got upgraded protection. Reinforced panels. Electronic locks, environmental controls, chemical detection systems. Garden areas received specialized monitoring, soil sensors, water quality alerts, plant health trackers, early warning systems for damage. Legal protections strengthened our position. Court orders prevented interference. Restraining orders blocked known threats. Injunctions protected property rights. Community patrols organized schedules. Regular checks, coordinated monitoring, rapid response protocols. Insurance expanded coverage. Environmental damage protection. Property rights enforcement. Legal defense funding. Local government supported our efforts. Expedited permits. Enhanced protections. Priority response to threats. Security consultants improved systems, vulnerability assessments, upgraded equipment, better protocols. Environmental experts enhanced monitoring. Soil testing programs, water quality checks, plant health assessments. The garden's design adapted to threats, protected areas for rare plants. Secured irrigation systems, hardened infrastructure. Documentation methods evolved. Better cameras, clearer evidence, stronger legal protection. Community involvement increased security. More observers, better coordination, faster response. Technology. strengthened our position, advanced sensors, improved monitoring, better protection. The garden thrived under protection. New growth, stronger plants, better yields. Our defenses proved effective. Threats detected, attacks prevented, property secured. Each security measure sent a message. We're prepared, we're protected, we're permanent. Legal victories reinforced protection. Court orders, police support, government backing. The community stood united, shared purpose, combined resources, collective strength. 1 year after Greenview's defeat, my garden hosted its biggest event. Yet community members gathered to celebrate our victory and dedicate new environmental protection programs. The transformation amazed everyone. Where chemical damage once scarred soil, native plants flourished. The greenhouse, rebuilt stronger, housed endangered species breeding programs. Each garden bed told a story of recovery. Emma, now permanent. HOA president announced new initiatives, community garden expansions, environmental education programs, property rights protections, each inspired by our struggle. John Chen's reporting won journalism awards. His investigation exposed corporate development tactics nationwide. Other communities used his work to protect themselves. Our legal victory created lasting change. New state laws protected gardens. Environmental regulations strengthened. Property rights expanded. Corporate developers faced stricter oversight. The community transformed too. More gardens appeared. Lawns converted to ecosystems. Neighbors shared growing tips. Our victory sparked green revolution. Janet, Meg, and David served. Their sentences, their testimonies helped other communities. Corporate developers couldn't hide anymore. Their tactics exposed forever. Greenview dissolved under legal pressure. Their assets funded environmental restoration. Development properties returned to communities. Justice shaped future growth. Our documentation methods became standard practice. Security systems, legal preparations, community coordination. Others followed our example. Environmental groups studied our success, protection strategies, response tactics, community organizing. Each lesson helped others. Property rights advocates cited our case, legal precedents, protection methods, community defense. Our experience guided others. Local government reformed practices, better oversight, stronger protections, community input. Each change prevented future abuse. The garden's new programs flourished. Education initiatives, research, and projects. Community outreach, each expanding our impact. Butterfly populations recovered strongly. Native plants thrived. Ecosystem services improved. Nature proved resilient. Community bonds grew stronger. Shared purpose, combined resources, collective vision. Unity created lasting change. My garden became more than plants. It represented resistance, community strength, environmental protection. Each visitor left inspired. The greenhouse hosted classes weekly, garden techniques, environmental education, community organizing. Knowledge spread like seeds. New garden projects started citywide, community initiatives, school programs, public spaces. Our victory sparked growth everywhere. Legal protections expanded steadily. Property rights, environmental safeguards, community input, each strengthening our position. Future developers faced new reality, community rights, environmental requirements, public oversight, each preventing abuse. The victory changed everything. Corporate accountability, community empowerment, environmental protection, each improvement, permanent. Our story spread nationwide. Media coverage, legal precedents, community inspiration, others followed our path. The garden stands stronger now, living proof of resistance, symbol of change, seed of hope. So if you're facing similar battles, remember, gardens grow stronger through adversity. Communities unite under pressure. Justice comes through persistence. 1 year into our victory, I discovered that success breeds new challenges. My garden had become more than a personal sanctuary. It was now a symbol of resistance against corporate development nationwide. Every week brought visitors, environmental activists seeking advice, community organizers learning tactics, homeowners fighting their own battles. Each wanted to understand how we'd won. The pressure of being a role model weighed heavily. My garden needed to be perfect. Not just for me anymore, but for everyone it inspired. Every plant, every feature, every detail scrutinized. New developers tested our defenses differently. They came with lawyers instead of forged documents, proposed compromises that threatened our victory, offered community improvements that masked old tactics. Emma Martinez organized weekly community meetings. We'd learned that victory required constant vigilance. Each new development proposal needed thorough investigation. Every zoning change demanded scrutiny. John Chen's reporting revealed disturbing patterns. Other development companies adopted Greenview's methods, but subtler. They learned from Greenview's mistakes, operated more cautiously. The garden's new research partnership with local universities brought unexpected challenges. Scientific studies required controlled conditions. Public access needed careful management. Educational programs demanded structure. Janet's release from prison sparked community tension. She moved to a nearby city, but her presence loomed. Corporate developers offered her consulting work. Her experience made her valuable. Our security system caught sophisticated probing, professional surveillance, corporate espionage attempts, each threat more advanced than Greenview's crude attacks. The greenhouse expansion project faced opposition, not from developers this time, but bureaucracy. New regulations, stricter requirements, increased oversight. Environmental protection brought paperwork challenges, regular testing requirements, documentation demands, compliance reports. Success created administrative burden. Local government support wavered under pressure. Development lobbies pushed back. Tax revenue promises tempted officials. Old patterns threatened return. The community garden program exceeded capacity. Too many participants, limited space, resource constraints. Success created management challenges. Property rights battles evolved. Developers found legal loopholes. Proposed zoning changes. Challenged. Environmental protections. Each victory revealed new vulnerabilities. National attention brought mixed benefits. Media coverage inspired others. Corporate interests studied our defenses. Politicians sought photo opportunities. Fame complicated everything. The garden's ecosystem faced natural challenges, climate changes, new pests, evolving requirements. Nature demanded constant adaptation. Educational programs grew beyond capacity. Teaching requests overwhelmed resources. Documentation requests flooded in. Success strained systems. Research partnerships expanded rapidly. University studies, environmental monitoring, climate change research. Each project added complexity. Community involvement deepened significantly. Volunteer programs, educational initiatives, protection efforts. Success required coordination. Legal precedents faced. New tests. Corporate lawyers found weaknesses. Judicial interpretations varied. Protection required vigilance. The garden's influence spread unexpectedly. National programs cited our model. International groups sought advice. Success brought responsibility. Future challenges loomed clearly. Development pressure continued. Corporate tactics evolved. Protection needed advancement. Looking back, our victory over Greenview marked a beginning, not an end. The garden still stands, stronger than ever. But now we guard it not just for ourselves, but for everyone it inspires. The battle for community rights and environmental protection never really ends. It just evolves, demanding new strategies, stronger unity, and deeper commitment. And hey, if you want to see how other communities are winning their battles against corporate developers, check out the next 2 videos appearing on your screen right now. The fight continues, and together, we're growing stronger. The congressional hearing room felt massive. My testimony about garden protection and corporate development tactics sparked federal investigation. Environmental Protection Agency representatives studied our case. Our documentation methods became federal guidelines. Local protection strategies shaped national policy. Corporate development faced new oversight. State legislatures across the country adopted Garden Protection Acts. Property rights expanded. Environmental safeguards strengthened. Community input became mandatory. Major developers changed practices nationwide. Corporate strategies shifted. Community engagement increased. Environmental protection prioritized. Our security innovations spread rapidly. Protection systems standardized. Monitoring methods improved. Documentation requirements expanded. University research programs studied our impact. Environmental benefits documented. Community strengthening measured. Economic effects analyzed. Legal precedents reshaped development law. Property rights strengthened. Environmental protections expanded. Corporate accountability increased. Janet's prison interview revealed corporate evolution. Development tactics changing. Community targeting sophisticated. Protection needs growing. Environmental groups adopted our methods. Protection strategies standardized. Response systems improved. Community organizing enhanced. Local government reforms spread nationally. Permit processes strengthened. Community input mandated. Environmental review expanded. Corporate development faced new reality. Community rights protected. Environmental requirements strict. Public oversight mandatory. Garden protection movement grew stronger. Community networks expanded. Protection methods improved. Support systems developed. International attention brought new challenges. Global developers studied tactics. Protection methods exported. Movement grew worldwide. Research partnerships expanded scope. Environmental impact studied. Community benefits measured. Protection methods analyzed. Educational programs reached nationwide. Protection strategies taught. Community organizing shared. Environmental education expanded. Legal protection systems evolved rapidly. Property rights strengthened. Environmental safeguards expanded. Community input guaranteed. Security systems advanced significantly. Protection methods improved. Monitoring systems enhanced. Documentation requirements increased. Corporate accountability increased substantially. Development oversight strengthened. Community rights protected. Environmental requirements enforced. Garden movement sparked lasting change. Environmental protection expanded. Community rights strengthened. Corporate development transformed. Future challenges emerged clearly. Protection needs evolving. Corporate tactics changing. Community response developing. Our victories' impact continued growing. Environmental protection spreading. Community rights expanding. Corporate accountability increasing. The garden still stands strong, but its influence reaches far beyond our community. Each new garden protected, each community strengthened, proves our victory's lasting impact. Ready for more incredible stories about standing up to corporate bullies? Click on either video showing up on your screen now. The movement keeps growing, and so do our victories.